It was one of those early mornings when the city still yawned in the half-light of dawn, its streets slick with the remnants of a late-night rain. Vincent had been driving his battered yellow cab for years. Each day, a mosaic of fleeting moments, chance encounters, and the unspoken sorrows of a man whose life was as much about the journeys of others as it was about his own. He had always believed that every fare carried a story, a secret waiting to be unveiled in the myriad reflections on his rearview mirror. Yet nothing in his long, arduous career had prepared him for the storm that was about to sweep into his own life. Vincent's wife, Mary Ann, was the kind of woman whose smile could brighten the gloomiest of mornings. Yet behind that radiant facade lay a restless heart, one that yearned for a life more passionate than the quiet domesticity they had settled into. For years, Mary Ann had harbored a secret that slowly seeped into the corners of their marriage. In their modest home on the edge of a bustling neighborhood, Mary Ann would often invite Edward, Vincent's longtime friend and colleague from a different chapter of his life, over for dinner. Edward was a man of refined manners and cultured tastes, a stark contrast to Vincent's rugged, unpretentious world. Though the meetings had initially seemed innocent, a friendly chat over a home-cooked meal, the air would thicken with a subtle electricity that neither Mary Ann nor Edward could fully explain. At first, Vincent had dismissed these get-togethers as nothing more than harmless social calls. After all, Edward had been a friend for years, a person who shared many memories and long-forgotten secrets with Vincent. But as time passed, Vincent began to notice the small details. The way Mary Ann's eyes would linger on Edward a moment too long, the soft laughter that seemed to carry an undercurrent of intimacy, the furtive glances exchanged in the dim glow of their living room. The nagging sensation that something was amiss grew steadily inside him. Vincent's mind would churn with conflicting emotions as he drove through the sleepless nights of the city. He could almost hear the silent whispers of doubt echoing in the back seat of his cab, mingling with the murmurs of the city streets. Every red light, every lonely intersection, every quiet suburban road became a metaphor for the crossroads on which his heart now stood. One evening, as the sky bled into hues of orange and red, Vincent returned home earlier than usual. The cab's engine was still warm beneath his fingertips as he walked the familiar path to his doorstep. He paused at the threshold, his heart pounding like a restless drum as he sensed a strange stillness in the air. Inside, the living room was bathed in the soft glow of table lamps, and in that gentle light, he saw Mary Ann, her silhouette outlined against the muted brilliance of the setting sun, seated across from Edward at the dining table. The scene struck him like a thunderclap. The clink of cutlery and the soft murmur of conversation were the only sounds in the silence that now seemed loaded with betrayal. For a moment, time itself appeared to halt. Vincent's thoughts tumbled over one another in a torrent of disbelief and despair. He remembered all those evenings when he had sat in his cab, listening to the city's quiet confessions, never imagining that his own life could harbor such heartache. Yet here it was. The woman he had trusted implicitly was entwined with a friend he had once considered a brother. The pain was not just the sting of infidelity. It was the agony of being betrayed by those closest to him, the profound loneliness of knowing that every smile, every tender glance had been a carefully constructed illusion. Vincent did not confront them that night. Instead, he quietly retreated into the darkness of his thoughts. The hours that followed were filled with a tumultuous mix of anger, sorrow, and an unexpected resolve. In the solitude of his small apartment, as the city roared and whispered outside his window, Vincent vowed that he would not be the one left to suffer in silence. The pain would not be allowed to fester in his heart like a poisonous weed. In that silent, seething moment, a plan began to form. A plan that was as shocking as it was calculated. Revenge, Vincent realized, was a language that sometimes spoke more clearly than words, and he would soon learn to speak it fluently. Days turned into weeks, and Vincent's demeanor transformed subtly. Outwardly, he continued his daily routine of navigating the intricate maze of city streets, picking up passengers who confided in him snippets of their own broken dreams. Yet inwardly, every mile he drove was measured against the ticking of a clock that marked the moments until his carefully orchestrated retribution would be set in motion. He began to observe Marianne and Edward with a detached curiosity, noting every smile, every gesture, every secret glance that passed between them. The more he watched, the more he realized that the lives of the people around him were complex tapestries woven with threads of both beauty and betrayal. Marianne, once the portrait of innocence and grace, now appeared as a woman trapped in a labyrinth of her own desires. Late at night, as Vincent lay awake listening to the distant hum of the city, he would recall how her eyes had shone with a longing he could no longer decipher. He remembered the subtle hints, a whispered phone call in the early hours, the way she would sometimes catch her reflection and pause, as though searching for answers that lay hidden behind her practiced smiles. And then there was Edward, a man whose every word now seemed to carry a hidden meaning, a man whose charm concealed a world of duplicity. He was the one who had ignited the spark of betrayal in Marianne's heart, and Vincent could not help but feel that the scales of fate were about to tip in an unforeseen direction. It was during one particularly sweltering summer evening that Vincent encountered another twist in the tapestry of his fate. While waiting at a red light near a busy intersection, he noticed a woman stepping out of a sleek black car. Her presence was as unexpected as it was striking. There was an air of quiet defiance in the way she carried herself, an enigmatic glimmer in her eyes that seemed to harbor a lifetime of secrets. Vincent's gaze, weary from countless nights on the road, lingered on her for a moment. He could not shake the feeling that their destinies were now inextricably linked. Over the following days, their paths crossed again and again. It turned out that she was none other than Claire, Edward's wife. In the briefest of encounters at a roadside diner or a chance meeting at a quiet parking lot, a spark of connection began to glow between Vincent and Claire. There was an understanding in her eyes, a silent acknowledgement of a shared burden, perhaps even a mutual betrayal. Claire, with her graceful poise and subtle melancholy, carried herself like a woman who had long given up on the facades of happiness. Her soft laughter and guarded smiles belied the hidden turmoil of a life caught in a web of deception. And so, in the quiet spaces between fate and coincidence, an unexpected intimacy blossomed between Vincent and Claire. At first, their interactions were fleeting, words exchanged in hushed tones, as if the very air around them were charged with secrets too dangerous to reveal. Vincent found himself drawn to Claire in a way that both thrilled and tormented him. Here was a woman who, like him, had been wounded by the sharp edges of betrayal. A woman who understood the bitter irony of loving someone who could never fully love you back. Their conversations meandered from the mundane to the metaphysical, touching upon the nature of trust, the fragility of human connections, and the sometimes painful beauty of a broken heart. With every encounter, Vincent felt the weight of his own despair lighten, replaced by a cautious optimism that maybe, just maybe, he could reclaim a piece of the self he had long thought lost. But fate, as it often does, had plans that were as unpredictable as they were cruel. One rainy evening, when the city's neon lights bled through the relentless drizzle like watercolors on a dark canvas, Vincent found himself alone at a deserted roadside bar. The sound of rain on the tin roof, the low murmur of voices in shadowed corners, and the pungent aroma of stale beer created an atmosphere of raw, unfiltered emotion. It was there that Vincent and Claire found each other once more, their eyes meeting across the room in a silent acknowledgement of the past and the promise of something dangerous. In that fleeting moment, as thunder rolled in the distance and the night grew ever darker, they both realized that the time for subtlety had passed. Their connection, once a delicate whisper, was now a resounding call, a call for retribution, for solace, for a final reckoning. In the days that followed, Vincent's inner turmoil gave way to a cold determination. He began to orchestrate a plan that was as intricate as it was audacious. Every move was calculated, every encounter with Marianne and Edward meticulously noted. Yet beneath the surface of his vengeful schemes, there simmered an undercurrent of something deeper, a desire to reclaim his dignity, to find meaning in the wreckage of a life that had been torn asunder by lies and deceit. The city, with its sprawling avenues and hidden alleyways, became both a stage and a sanctuary for his plans. In the labyrinthine streets, Vincent found echoes of his own fractured soul, and every shadow seemed to whisper secrets of a destiny that he was now determined to shape. As the days bled into weeks, the tension in Vincent's world grew palpable. Marianne, oblivious to the storm that was gathering behind her calm exterior, continued her dalliance with Edward as if it were an innocent flirtation, a mere dalliance of two souls lost in the illusion of desire. Yet, the very air in their home grew heavy with unspoken accusations and the silent, gnawing awareness that nothing would ever be the same again. Late at night, while the city slept under a blanket of restless dreams, Vincent would sit in the darkened cabin of his cab, replaying every memory, every smile, every hidden glance in his mind like a cruel movie on an endless loop. And then there was Claire, a woman whose eyes had begun to reflect the storm of their shared fate. Her own suffering, concealed behind a mask of quiet resignation, resonated deeply with Vincent. In the stolen moments of their clandestine meetings, when the world outside ceased to exist, they found a fragile sanctuary in each other's arms. Their whispered confessions and trembling touches were the building blocks of a new, albeit dangerous, alliance, a rebellion against the injustices inflicted upon them by the capricious hands of fate. In these moments, Vincent no longer felt the bitter sting of betrayal. Instead, he experienced a bittersweet liberation, as though he were shedding the weight of 1,000 regrets and stepping into a light that had been hidden for far too long. Yet, as every great tale of vengeance must, the path Vincent chose was fraught with unforeseen consequences. His newfound connection with Claire did not remain hidden for long. The intricate web of secrets began to unravel in ways he could neither predict nor control. Marianne, sensing that something was amiss in the quiet spaces of their home, grew increasingly anxious. Her nightly phone calls took on a desperate tone, and the once comforting hum of the television now echoed with questions she dared not ask aloud. Edward, too, began to notice subtle shifts, a lingering glance in the mirror, a shadow that did not belong, a silence where laughter once rang out. It was as if the very walls of their lives were closing in, and every heartbeat pulsed with the ominous promise of an inevitable reckoning. One fateful night, when the rain hammered the city in relentless fury and the wind howled like a chorus of anguished souls, Vincent decided that the time had come for the final act. Under the cover of darkness, with the city's neon glow painting the wet pavement in spectral hues, he arranged a meeting, a confrontation that would irrevocably alter the lives of everyone involved. In a secluded parking garage, its concrete walls echoing with the distant sounds of a city that never truly slept, Vincent, Marianne, Edward, and Claire came face to face. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic declarations, only a silence heavy with the weight of all that had transpired. In that tense moment, each person saw in the eyes of the others the mirrored reflection of their own pain, their own guilt, and the haunting realization that revenge, however sweet it might seem, was a double-edged sword. Vincent's voice, when it finally broke the silence, was low and resolute. He spoke not of forgiveness or of the past, but of the need to confront the present, a present that demanded accountability, however painful that accountability might be. His words, measured and deliberate, cut through the silence like a blade. He recounted the quiet moments of doubt, the sleepless nights, the heartbreak of discovering a betrayal that had undermined the very foundation of his life. He spoke of the long hours spent behind the wheel of his taxi, each fare a reminder of a life lived in the shadow of a secret that now bled into every corner of his existence. Marianne's eyes filled with tears as she listened, a torrent of emotions crashing over her in the dim light of that underground space. Edward stood there, his face a mask of regret and disbelief, as the reality of his actions pressed in from all sides. And Claire, whose very presence had ignited the spark of a forbidden intimacy, now trembled under the weight of the consequences. The confrontation was not a catharsis, but rather a crucible in which every hidden truth was forced into the light. In that charged silence, Vincent revealed the final twist of his plan, a twist that none present had anticipated. Instead of unleashing his rage in a destructive manner, he had chosen to reclaim control over his own destiny. The revenge he had once envisioned was not merely an act of retribution, but a transformation, an acceptance that the pain inflicted upon him was a part of a larger tapestry that could, if he allowed it, lead to his own rebirth. In a voice filled with equal measures of sorrow and determination, he declared that the cycle of betrayal and vengeance must end with him. He would no longer be a victim of circumstance, nor would he allow himself to be defined solely by the sins of those around him. The air in the parking garage seemed to shift as his words hung between them like fragile glass. Marianne, caught between remorse and defiance, could only whisper an apology, a recognition of the pain she had caused, though it was too late for redemption. Edward, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, nodded slowly in resignation, knowing that the path he had chosen had led only to ruin. And Claire, her expression a mix of anguish and relief, reached out to Vincent, her touch tentative and filled with unspoken gratitude for the liberation that his reckoning had brought her. As the night deepened and the rain finally subsided, the four of them emerged from the underground chamber of secrets, each carrying the heavy burden of their past choices. Vincent's taxi, once a symbol of the countless journeys of strangers, now became a chariot for his own rebirth, a vessel in which he would drive away from the wreckage of betrayal and towards a future that, though uncertain, held the promise of healing. The city, with all its ceaseless motion and infinite stories, bore witness to this transformation. In the reflective puddles on the pavement, the neon lights danced as if celebrating the triumph of a man who had finally found the courage to face the truth. In the days that followed, Vincent began to rebuild the fragments of his life with a quiet resilience. He poured his heart into his work, each ride a meditation on the impermanence of pain and the beauty of new beginnings. Marianne retreated into herself, haunted by the ghosts of her choices and the irreparable damage they had wrought. Edward, burdened by regret, sought solace in solitude, his once charming smile now replaced by a shadow of remorse. And Claire, freed from the confines of a loveless marriage, embarked on a journey of self-discovery, a journey that, while fraught with uncertainty, was filled with the promise of authenticity and renewal. Yet, even as the wounds of the past began to mend, the echoes of that fateful night in the parking garage lingered like a distant melody, a reminder that the road to redemption was long and winding. Vincent's heart, though scarred, had learned to beat with a newfound rhythm, a rhythm that was as much about letting go as it was about holding on. The taste of revenge, once so bitter on his tongue, had transformed into the bittersweet flavor of understanding, a flavor that spoke of both loss and liberation. And so, beneath the ever-watchful gaze of a city that never slept, Vincent continued to navigate the labyrinth of life. His taxi became more than just a means of earning a living. It became a confessional, a repository of hopes and regrets, a moving testament to the fact that every soul carries its own burdens and every heart its own secrets. As he drove through rain-soaked avenues and sunlit boulevards, Vincent found solace in the anonymity of the night, in the gentle hum of the engine and the soft cadence of passing conversations. With every mile, he learned that life, in all its unpredictable cruelty and fleeting tenderness, was a journey best undertaken with eyes wide open and a spirit unafraid to forgive. In time, the scars of betrayal softened into memories, and the relentless pursuit of vengeance gave way to the quiet art of acceptance. Vincent's encounters with passengers, each with their own struggles and dreams, reminded him that suffering was a universal language, and that in the shared vulnerability of human experience lay the seeds of compassion. Even Marianne, in the isolation of her own remorse, began to see that regret could be a catalyst for change, if only one dared to face it. Edward, too, emerged from the cocoon of self-loathing, his painful introspection eventually giving way to a desire for genuine redemption. And Claire, whose clandestine connection with Vincent had ignited a spark of transformation, found that the path to healing was not paved with stolen moments, but with the honest pursuit of one's true self. There were still days when Vincent's mind would wander back to that rainy night. The charged silence, the weight of unspoken truths, the moment when he chose to break free from the cycle of retribution. In those moments, as the city whispered around him and the memories rose unbidden, he would smile, a soft, bittersweet smile that spoke of both sorrow and strength. For he knew that every heartbreak carried the possibility of rebirth, every betrayal the potential for renewal. And so, in the ever-turning dance of life, where every ending held the seed of a new beginning, Vincent continued to drive through the dark, the light, the chaos, and the calm, knowing that the journey itself was the reward. As the seasons changed and the city's rhythm evolved, Vincent's story became a quiet legend whispered among the neon-lit streets and the dimly lit corners of lonely diners. Passengers would sometimes mention the cab driver with eyes that seemed to have seen too much, a man whose silence spoke volumes and whose smile carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken tales. And though the wounds of betrayal might never fully vanish, they had, in time, become the mosaic of experiences that rendered him resilient, compassionate, and undeniably human. In the end, Vincent's journey was not defined by the revenge he once sought, but by the transformation that followed, a metamorphosis born of pain, acceptance, and an unwavering determination to find beauty even in the darkest of places. His taxi, gliding along rain-slick streets beneath an ever-changing sky, became a symbol of hope and renewal, a reminder that even in the labyrinth of shattered dreams and broken promises, one could always find the courage to steer toward a brighter horizon. And so, beneath the unyielding gaze of the city's starlit canopy, Vincent's story continues to unfold, a continuous, winding narrative of love lost and found, a betrayal that gave way to forgiveness, and of a man who discovered that the true measure of one's worth lies not in the mistakes made, but in the relentless pursuit of a better tomorrow. The roads he traveled, fraught with echoes of the past and whispers of the future, bore silent witness to the truth that every end, no matter how painful, is but a prelude to a new beginning. In the soft murmur of the city's nocturne and the quiet hum of his cab's engine, Vincent found his peace. He had learned that life's most profound lessons are not taught by grand gestures, but by the small, almost imperceptible moments, the shared smiles, the gentle nods of understanding, and the silent promises made in the fleeting twilight between despair and hope. And so, with every new day that dawned over the sprawling metropolis, Vincent embraced the endless possibilities that lay ahead, secure in the knowledge that even the deepest wounds could one day give way to the quiet, unyielding beauty of forgiveness and renewal. Thus, as the city's lights flickered like distant memories and the relentless pulse of life marched on, Vincent's tale, of betrayal, of a love that had once been so pure, and of a revenge that had ultimately led him to discover the true essence of his soul, remained an enduring testament to the indomitable spirit of the human heart. A heart that, even after enduring the bitterest of betrayals and the harshest of retributions, continued to beat with the promise of redemption and with the quiet, unshakable belief that every storm eventually gives way to a serene, sunlit horizon. And so, dear listener, as you journey through your own labyrinth of joys and sorrows, remember Vincent's tale, a tale woven from the threads of passion and regret, of shattered illusions and newfound hope. And know that within every dark corner of existence, there lies a glimmer of light waiting to be discovered, a chance for rebirth hidden in the gentle cadence of life's eternal song.